Hey everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I hope you're having an amazing day and thanks so much for joining me for another art video. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing my process for a couple of quick sketches that I created as value studies or value thumbnails. Thumbnails are quick, small sketches or even little quick paintings that are usually created in preparation for a larger, more finalized piece, but thumbnail sketches can also be great exercises that we can do in our sketchbooks at any point in time. By doing this kind of exercise, we can continue developing our knowledge of essential art fundamentals such as composition, value, color, and we can also continue developing our skills to simplify and get the main essence of what we're seeing in our reference photo or whatever it is that we have in front of us in real life down on paper quickly. There is no right or wrong way to go about creating your thumbnail sketches. It really is up to you, the materials that you like using, and what you feel is going to help you study or practice whatever it is that you need to advance on or whatever it is that's going to help you arrive at the decisions that you need to make so that you can create a strategy that is going to help you reach better success with your final piece. So with all this said, in the two sketches that you're going to see me work on today, I'm studying value. So I'm simplifying the images that I'm looking at into light areas, mid-tone areas, and darkest dark areas. And the way that I like doing this is via monochromatic sketches. With a monochromatic sketch or painting, you're using just one single color in its different variations or tints, tones, and shades to develop different values. And in this case, I decided to just go with black and white. I'm first going to be working on a thumbnail sketch of a nature scene, and then I'm going to do the exact same thing, but this time with a still life. You're going to notice that I desaturated my reference photos, meaning I opened these reference photos in a photo editing software and turned them into grayscale or black and white photos. By looking at a black and white photo, it is a lot easier for me to decipher light value areas, mid-tone areas, and darkest dark areas because all of these different colors in the full colored photo have been unified into one same scale from white to black or black to white. When you're working with a full colored photo, you have a ton of different scales for all of these different colors. And when you're just getting started with developing your ability to pinpoint lights, midtones, and darks so that you can make them happen in an artwork, this can be quite challenging to do. And so this is something that I highly recommend for beginners. Practice with grayscale or black and white photos. Develop your ability to pinpoint highlights, midtones, and darks via grayscale photos, and then you're going to find it easier to move on to full colored photos. All this said, even for more advanced artists, these kinds of studies or prep work can be incredibly helpful because we can ensure that we're going to be creating a nice range of values throughout our piece and also a great balance between lights and darks in our final piece. Value and being able to develop a wide range of values from highlights to midtones to very dark darks is what is going to allow you to develop depth and a believable sensation of light and shadow in any type of artwork that you may choose to work on. I'm going to be working with regular Prismacolor colored pencils, and I'm just going to be using 3 different pencils: my black, a medium gray, and a light gray. I'm going to work on simplifying what I see as darkest areas, mid-tone areas, and lightest areas. Okay, so with all that said, I'm going to go ahead and jump straight into this process. I'm going to make sure to leave links to the 2 reference photos that I used for these studies down below in the description box in case you'd like to download them and work on these studies yourself. If you've never done this kind of value study before, right here on screen, I am sharing my reference photo that I chose in black and white. And what I've done here for you is I've circled the majority of the major darkest value shapes that I'm able to see easily in this reference photo. A lot of artists find it helpful to squint at their reference photo in order to simplify all of those major shapes and really acknowledge these different value shapes, light shapes, darker shapes, as abstract, irregular shapes. And right here, I've circled most of the lightest value shapes that I'm able to see in my reference photo. These are very, very light value areas where I want my paper to be left shining through, or where I'm going to be using my lightest colors or just a very small amount of pigment in those areas to communicate that very light value. And pretty much everything that I didn't circle right now are midtones. I'm gonna leave my grayscale reference photo right here in case you'd like to see it. I'm gonna go ahead and get started with my lighter gray, and I'm gonna be working from my lightest color towards my darker color. And remember, this is a quick sketch, so I'm gonna be working sketchy, I'm gonna be working quick. I'm gonna be leaving little sections of lightest lights where I want my paper to shine through in my light areas, or the lightest areas that I'm able to see in the photo there. So essentially with this lightest gray, I'm going over everything that is not a highlight or a super, super light area. Working quick, working sketchy today. These are color studies or value studies. These are not final pieces. These are meant to help us prepare or plan for our final piece. Okay, these are not meant to be perfect. They're meant to be sketchy and explorational, okay? So there's my first lightest gray. I left little teeny tiny sections of white paper shining through in very light areas that I'm able to see in that reference photo. I'm gonna go ahead and switch to my medium gray here. And now with this medium gray, I'm gonna go over mid-tone areas and darkest dark areas. Not worrying too much about plant texture or leaf texture right now. I'm just focusing on values, and then later on I can develop a little bit of leaf and plant texture here and there. But again, this is a value and a color kind of exploration that we're doing today, not so much a texture exploration. So anything that we do in regards to texture, that's kind of an extra. Just working quick here. I have a beautiful, bold, dark tree. And as you continue building up your values, you're gonna see the image start to pop. So again, I'm going over darker midtone areas and darkest dark areas here. Remember to simplify everything into 3-4 different values. Don't worry so much about getting the transition super perfect or anything like that. Just focus on the major value sections. And you can jump around. In fact, I would recommend jumping around the entire thing and not getting stuck in one single place. This is about composition, right? So we're trying to see everything as a whole. And if you get stuck in one single place, trying to perfect something, that is gonna keep you from seeing the whole. You wanna skip around and come back to seeing everything as a whole. Notice how I am simplifying everything. It can really be helpful to squint at your reference photo and just see shapes. Don't try to draw a perfect tree or a perfect rock or anything like that. Just focus on shapes. All right, so I'm almost done with this gray here. A little plant. All right, so I'm gonna switch on over to my black now. And if after I go through the sequence once, from lighter to darker, if I wanna come back to my lightest gray or my medium gray, I can do that. But again, the point here is not to create super soft transitions or anything like that. It's really to simplify and focus on the major value areas. So this is my darkest color, my black. And I'm just gonna be using this black in darkest sections that I'm able to see in that reference photo. Side of that bridge there. I also have a very dark value down here. Dark value over here. This big tree is creating a very dark shadow. Then I have a few pretty dark tree trunks right here. and work on this main tree, which would be the focal point for this piece. If I were to create a painting for this tree would certainly be the focal point. Notice how I'm skipping over lighter value areas with this black, and I'm just going over the darkest darks. When it comes to branches, I'm really trying to skip over little sections where those leaves would be overlapping that branch. Notice how everything is really revealing itself. The depth is being created simply by me creating all of these different values, lights, midtones, and darks. The image is becoming revealed with value. There's a big tree trunk here. Okay, so I think I'm missing a little bit of a mid-tone here. It's not quite that light. It's not this dark. So I'm gonna go back to the lighter gray or the lightest gray, whichever you feel would help you develop the value that you're seeing. Make sure that you switch to the proper color you need. Don't continue using the same color if it doesn't make sense for the value that you're trying to develop. Pay attention to value and switch between your colors as you go. Going back to my darkest here. Sometimes I need to do a little bit more work with one of my previous colors and then I switch on back. I'm gonna do the little fence back here, a little hint of it. Cute little fence. There's a plant. Going back to my medium gray here for these lighter values in this plant. All right, so major value areas have been developed. You want to push the midtones a tad bit more down here. You can overlap the lights on top of the darkest, but don't try to overlap the darkest on top of the lights because you're gonna eat up those lightest values. And that's gonna be much more difficult to fix. It's always better to go from lightest to darkest because you're always going to be able to darken, but sometimes you can't go back and lighten as easily. Just developing a tiny bit of a hint of rocks down here, but again, this would be more detail and like texture development, and this is kind of secondary to the value work that we're practicing today. Really trying to acknowledge everything as shapes, trying to stay away from lines or trying to outline things. And finally, if you want to go ahead and add in some plant or leaf texture, you can certainly do that. Go in with some scribbling. Just make sure that you still pay attention to your different value areas, right? You don't want to start doing scribbling and create a lot of like very dark marks and start flattening out lighter value areas or lighter midtone areas. Perhaps change to your lighter gray or your medium gray to do scribbling with those colors in lighter value areas if you want to add texture into those areas. All right, you guys, we're all done with this nature scene thumbnail. I'm now going to be moving on to the still life thumbnail. Focus on those lightest values, the midtones and the darkest darks. I'm going to be starting with my lightest gray. And as I said, I'm going to try to leave the lightest highlight sections free of any color. Going over everything except for the lightest light areas. I'm not pressing down hard at all. If you're using colored pencils like I am, Don't start burnishing or pressing down too hard in these beginning stages. You want to save those kinds of techniques until the very end, because you start damaging your paper, and once the paper is burnished, it just doesn't take the color the same way. That tooth of that paper is affected, and the color just doesn't get laid down the same way after the paper has been burnished. So any kind of technique like that, you want to leave it until the end. All right, so there's my initial gray. This tablecloth is pretty light, so I'm gonna leave it like that for now. I'm gonna change on over to my medium gray, and this time I'm gonna go over just the midtones and darkest dark areas, allowing all of the previous lighter values, both the highlights and the lightest gray, to shine through uncovered, remain uncovered in all those lighter value areas. So again, I'm really focusing on only going over the darker midtones and the darkest darks. And you can go back to another one of your colors and your grays in this case. I do always get to a point at which it's a back and forth. Like initially I do go in a sequence. I do make my way from lightest to darkest, but then I always get to a point at which I bring in another one of my colors. So if I have to work on midtones or transitions or things like that, I allow myself to go back to a lighter color if I need to. Okay, so there's my medium gray. I am now going to go in with my black. And with the black, I'm really only looking to push my very darkest dark areas. In this case, the entire background wall is very, very dark. It's black looking in the photo. So that entire area, I'm gonna go in to color with my black. This is really going to push that contrast. Remember that thumbnails are quick and sketchy explorations or part of the planning process for an actual finalized piece. So there is really no sense in being overly perfectionistic or spending way too long in any single one of these. These are just for our personal studies, our personal explorations, for our personal practice. Really train yourself to observe the reference photo constantly throughout the drawing or the painting process. Never stop looking at that reference, whether it's a photo that you're using or something that you have in front of you in real life. Okay, so the back wall is in. I'm gonna sharpen my black colored pencil here so that I can go into very small areas. I don't want to start adding in my black into midtones or lightest light areas. I want to keep the black where the dark values are present in that reference photo, just as close as possible. So there's a very dark shape right here inside of this bowl. And a very dark shadow in here created by the peach. And a very dark cast shadow shape. Okay, so I'm gonna go back to my lightest gray and I'm gonna work on transitions just a tiny bit more before moving on to the next study. I'm gonna go back to the lightest gray, need a little bit of a lighter value. Right now, my lightest light areas are a little bit too big, and I feel I need to work on transitions a little bit more, make those whitest, lightest areas just a tiny bit smaller, and work on transitions between my mid-tone grays and my lightest light grays, while of course protecting the lightest highlight areas and leaving them free of color. I'm gonna add a little bit of a lighter gray in some sections here in the fabric so that it's not completely flat white. Going back to my medium gray. Going back to the black and doing a little bit more work down here in the little base of this bowl. Going back and forth between my grays for finishing touches. All right, so I'm all done with this monochromatic thumbnail sketch, in which I simplified all the major value areas into highlights, midtones, and darkest darks. So the highlight areas are sections of paper that I left completely uncovered or with a very small amount of color on them. Then I have my midtones where I use my lighter grays. Then I have my darkest dark areas. And with this, I'm all done with these 2 quick value studies. Did you enjoy this tutorial? I really hope you did. And if so, make sure to check out everything that I'm offering over at my Patreon membership website, because for a very small amount a month, you're going to get immediate access to my exclusive tutorials, classes, and resources that I don't share anywhere else. All of these exclusive tutorials include my downloadable outline sketches so that you don't have to start from scratch, reference photos, and my supply lists. There's already a library of over 75 sketching and watercolor painting tutorials that are real-time, meaning they are not sped up or edited. They are fully narrated, and I take you through my entire process, making sure to explain everything as clearly as possible, step by step. 2 new exclusive full-length tutorials are added into this exclusive library every single month. For those of you who are interested in really taking your artwork to the next level and want to know all of the inside secrets that I learned about in art school and courses that I've invested in myself, there's also a full library on classes on art fundamentals in which all of the bases are covered. That library has now over 35 classes and workshops. All have assignments at the end that help you actually put your knowledge to the test. And there's a brand new class or workshop added at the beginning of every single month. As if all of this weren't enough, you also get a weekly sketchbook prompt sent to your inbox to help you stay consistent with your art practice. There's a live training, workshop, or paint-along session with me every single month. Members in the $15 tier and upwards get access to thorough feedback from me on their work whenever they need it, and much more. There are different tiers that you can join that give you access to different things, which you can choose from depending on your goals and needs. So go ahead and check it out. I'm going to make sure to leave a link where you can find out more down below in the description box of this video. And I would love to get to know more about you and your work and have you join this innermost art community of mine. All right, you guys, that is going to do it for today's video. I really hope that you enjoyed it and that you found it helpful. And if you did, pretty please make sure to give this video a thumbs up, because it really helps support the work that I am doing here on YouTube and helps others get to know about my channel. Thank you so much for watching today. Don't forget to subscribe and click on that little bell so that you can be notified of when I share my new videos, which happens every single week. Have a beautiful rest of the day and see you soon. Bye guys.